Hello, Internet. Welcome once again to Kopitiam Council. New episode, new week, and new month as well. This is 1st of April. April Fools to all of you. Those who observe the day. I mean, unless you are a teenager, I don't think you would really into it anymore. But yes, certain corporation decided to do big prank on other people today on Twitter. But that's for the Twitter messes. And as usual, I'm Haffisz, and today you are with also.
So usually with me, Adi, and I just want to say Happy Easter Sunday to all my Christian friends that are celebrating the Catholic Easter Sunday to be exact. And I think we're getting ready for the end of the Ramadan fasting month. So to all my other Muslim friends, as the time of recording this episode, it isn't long now until we get into the celebrations of Hari Raya Eid Mubarak.
Yeah, this is the last 10 days, and the Muslims believe that the Laylatul Qadr could be one of the nights of the last 10 nights of Ramadan that is said better than 10,000 months. So that's a little bit facts for all of you out there. As usual, what's the first topic on our list, Adi?
Okay, I think we're going to address something that has a tragedy that has befallen one country that we like to cover here on Kopitiam Council, which is the Federation of Russia. Recently, we have seen the attack by terrorist groups at the Crocus City Hall in Moscow, where at least 100 plus people were killed by militants by what you can call a terrorist attack. However, the nature of this attack came with a lot of speculation as to who is responsible, whether or not this was some kind of false flag, or whether there is some kind of interference from entities that are outside of Russia, or even more involved, such as its border and its conflict with Ukraine. So there's a lot to dissect here. So where do we start off from here, Hafiz?
Since that happened, Vladimir Putin have been signaling to the international community that he is not believing entirely on the ISIS claim on it, because as ISIS case certainly they said that we are the perpetrator of this barbaric act, but Putin's not quite buying that. So just I think 2 days ago, foreign ministry of Russia actually making an official statement that now Ukraine and of course the proxies, US, UK, responsible for this attack due to certain, from the sources that they believe. So I think what we interested in is like who actually benefit from this. Like we can talk about the facts of the tragedy, how I think 136 people already counted dead on the venue, but who actually benefit from this, and would Russia be? So I believe in two possibility, because unless you are Putin or you are Biden, you can be so sure who did this. But if you're just normal average Joe like you and I think two possibility here. First, it's caused by US and its allies, NATO and whatever, Ukraine, because they want to drag Russia into the even longer war with this. Because of course this is also tied to November US presidential election. Secondly, because this how we can see how eager Putin wants to put a blame on Ukraine. I think this is like some sort of a justification for Vladimir Putin, to put a pin on blame on Ukraine side, easily because they want to, as they discovered that these four gunmen actually heading towards Ukraine border. So they have so many reasons to believe that Ukraine also behind for this. What do you grab from this, Adi?
Okay, I think I used to think that the narrative that it could have been caused through Ukrainian or proxies, such as from the United States. I thought that would be been the case. But just a correction here: the suspects, they did not run to Ukraine. That was the message that Vladimir Putin put out during his speech, where he was condemning Ukraine. He was putting all on Ukraine, that Ukraine was committing was responsible for this, but actually the suspects were captured near the border with Belarus, not actually towards Ukraine. It's quite a distance from where they were found, and that seems to be the logic of where they were actually heading, these terrorists, these people who committed these tragedies. So I'm not going to really, I can't really buy into the idea that this could have been Western kind of, or even a Ukrainian aggravation, because I think at this certain stage, Ukraine and NATO has a lot to lose here. They have little to gain, but a lot to lose with this kind of situation if they were the ones that were committing this. Now, if you take this into effect, Ukraine right now is basically on life support from the international community to provide relief efforts, to provide the necessary supplies to make sure that they can defend themselves during this whole conflict, during this whole war. So to be able to, if Ukraine was somehow responsible for this and it was investigated and it turned out to really be an attack from Ukraine, that would devastate the image that Ukraine has cultivated with its international allies. So this is why I think that this would be unlikely scenario that Ukraine, and I think this extends also to NATO and the Western powers, because if they were also responsible, then it would even damage their already soiled reputation when it comes to involving themselves in international conflicts. So I would rule out these two possibilities. Now, here is where I want to bring up the third narrative here, because ISIS Khorasan did claim responsibility for this terrorist attack. And I think there is some merit to this kind of line of thinking to believe that maybe ISIS-K could have been responsible. Now, attacks of an Islamist nature in Russia is not actually new. Of course, this is the most deadliest attack in the past 10 years, but it's not the one with the highest amount of casualties. In 2002, the Dubrovka theater had Chechens, Muslim Chechens, Islamist Chechens commit a terrorist attack with 200 people dead. The Beslan school massacre was in 2004. 334 were dead, 168 were children. And about, let's say, 6 years ago, the St. Petersburg metro saw 15 people killed as well. And these were all, the responsibility was claimed by radical Islamist groups here. And I think ISIS-K, we cannot underestimate as well this entity that it is ISIS, because even though in the last 10 years we've seen some of their influence wane, they went from the almost like a caliph, almost like a state with a monopoly on violence on people in the territories in Iraq and Syria. I think we're downplaying here what they are now, because they are currently cementing their foothold in places with a huge security breach or security concern for Russia, which is Afghanistan, which is where ISIS-K bases its operations out of. They committed an attack on the Russian embassy in Kandahar, I believe, and that was definitely aimed to damage the ability for the people, the Taliban government in Afghanistan to conduct its relationships with Russia and with other potential partners such as China and possibly the international community. So I don't really think that we should rule out that possibility. But I think if you want to disagree with me, then go ahead.
I actually with an agreement with you, because I think even though Ukraine is not not responsible for this, but it's still the same side, where because the behind this, I think ultimately belief is the United States, because even ISIS or ISIS-K, if you look at like those who they attack in the last 5 or 10 attacks that they did, was all somehow coincidentally the enemy of the United States. So this is some sort of like some sort of how they work together and how quick ISIS take responsible to this, and just sort of like being a lapdog to United States. If you believe that ISIS is created by CIA, so there you go, the fantasy of like believing in this kind of scenario is true. So I think whether it's Ukraine or whether it's US, I think that ultimately leads to US benefiting from this. Everything that they wanted to, how they want to ruin Russia from preventing or helping Trump in the next election, like in the previous election, how they were talking about Russia actually wants to ruin American democracy. So, but turns out Trump actually lost the election, and there was no proof that Russia actually helping Trump. But no one can be too certain that Russia is never actually mindling in U.S. Democracy. So again, Adi, this is, I think, goes back to the United States presidential election this November, and also how it plays out until from now until the end, and also to make it even more complicated, Israel also in the mix, because recently. Uh, Putin also announced that they want to do more things. This is just like new things to help the Palestinian in this. So it is a web of how do you call it, proxies wars and whatnot. And I still believe this is between Russia and US. What are the smokes that being thrown? Like Ukraine is it ISIS, or even some militants from Chechen or whatever. These are all smoke screens that, for us to better understand the geopolitics between Russia and US.
I think I would rephrase smokescreen. I would say it's just smaller nodes in the wider conflict between US and Russia here. But I think it's also interesting to note that this attack that was planned in Moscow was actually picked up by American intelligence. Now, for a lot of people, we like to think that the CIA may have a few lapses in their monitoring, but in fact, I think they have a monopoly on monitoring all these terrorist groups, these terrorist cells. I think they have agents almost all across the world. They could even have agents here in Malaysia, maybe even Sabah, keeping close tabs. And they did send a warning to the Kremlin of an inevitable attack on Russian soil. However, a month later, this is what happened here. So in a way, it kind of feeds into what you said, Haffiz. I mean, if the American intelligence agencies knows what is going on, they know everything. They know who is planning what groups are active where. Then it would be safe to assume that a warning is just a warning, right? But flaring it up, letting it be, is just as complacent, if I would say. Like, for example, when the 9/11 attacks were planned in a hotel in Kuala Lumpur, the FBI, CIA, NSA were very much aware of the meetings that were happening in that particular hotel. However, action wasn't really taken here. So in a way, if we have to look at it as well, that intelligence agencies in America may act on its own accord, that may even be contradictory to American interests. And who knows what interest is when it comes to informing the Kremlin on what is happening here. But in just going back to the element of ISIS here, yes, like I mentioned, they have lost a lot of influence, but I think they're gaining a lot more in other ways, because we look at a lot of the oblasts, autonomous oblasts or autonomous governments in Russia that are mostly inhabited by Muslims, by Muslim population. These are some of the poorest, provinces in Russia. They have been at the forefront for a lot of conflict and a lot of strife. So it's very easy for in groups such as ISIS-K or other militant Islamic groups to infiltrate and to actually recruit more and more, potential recruits to actually perform this kind of attack. Because before, when Russia was able to, neutralize a lot of ISIS agents in, let's say, Syria and Iraq, it did so because it had the Wagner group to actually support it, to actually suppress it. Now Wagner is mostly focused on the Ukrainian front and has proven to be ineffective, but still having to be deployed there, not to mention in places in Africa. It definitely painted a lot of targets, give a lot of reason for ISIS and its adjacent groups to actually target Russia, just as much as how Al-Qaeda was having its own grievances against the United States. So I'm not discounting the possibility of this as a proxy, but looking at how ISIS sentiments could be based on what has happened, the consequences and circumstances of what happened in the last 2 decades, it wouldn't be surprising to have seen something like this happen.
Yeah, but and another thing that we need to pick up as well, that this attack if it were to be done by ISIS or ISIS-K, like what stand out is actually that these four gunmen, actually fled the scene. Because in the previous attack, ISIS, the typical ISIS would be like they blow themselves up, or they just like kill everyone until they got killed themselves. So experts also saying that the way they conduct this is a different way from ISIS would be doing. But nevertheless, ISIS still keep claiming this is part of their act. So I think we a lot of being thrown here, like
Yeah.
maybe they just like purposely like, hey, do different style just to confuse the community. And to pick up on CIA know every ways, they know everything, right? Like I'm sure the Russian have some sort of intelligence that would be on par or not, equally better as well. So I think they both know. It's just how they're moving the chess on the pawn, because now with this happening, Russia gained a lot of sympathy as well. If you believe that, whichever narrative, Ukraine or Russian narrative, you will have sympathy towards Russian, because the killing of innocent people is always something that, especially 136 innocent soul, is always headlines for any news, and it would last for weeks or even months. So I think this is. Putin playing his chess with Biden, and how they would make this up to be. And like I said, I use the word smoke screens, but what we read into this could be wrong, definitely, because ongoing what happened in Ukraine is more than 2 years now, and we don't see almost the end of it. Yeah, so I think yes, there's region being captured by Russia, but there's no way of we can see a definite, at certain deadline Russia will gain the whole territory, including Kiev or whatever, in certain date. So there's no certainty in this, and that's what they really, I think, really good at, like giving out signals and doing the opposite things or other things that would actually play to their advantage. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in a way it did galvanize a lot of, let's say, those that were skeptic about the conflict that was happening in Ukraine in the Kremlin to have push those more moderate people who are on the fence to go for it, because Putin's speech was definitely just attacking Ukraine, blaming Ukraine, laying it all on Ukraine, and that is why we have to do what we have to do, what Putin has to do. And it's interesting to note that not long after the attack, the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov upgraded in a way. He stated that it's no longer a special operation, military operation. It is now a war. So that means resources can be mobilized as such when it comes to full-scale conflict, full-scale war. But at the same time, this could also potentially harm Putin's reputation as the strong, iron-willed leader that he has cultivated over the past few years. He is on course to becoming the longest serving leader in Russia since, I think it was Joseph Stalin's time. And if he continues this for about 2 or 3 more election cycles, he could overtake even Catherine the Great as the longest serving Russian leader of all time. So this Putin, is full stop, like all full throttle here to ensure that his legacy cannot be tarnished here, right? And for something like a security breach such as this to happen, it would also be very damning. So even if the way you look at it is the Kremlin, Putin stands to benefit from this, but he also stands to potentially lose out as well, especially with an election year coming in. But with considering the fact that opposition leaders have been having mysteriously dying, opposition to his military operations, such as Wagner Group somehow being neutralized and suppressed, with plane crashes suddenly happening. So I would say there's two sides to this, and depending how Putin capitalizes on this, we would see where the priorities really lie. Do the priorities really lie in Ukraine, or does it rely in trying to contain the rise of these militant groups? Because one thing to note is that the equipment used by these 4 gunmen was the rifles, right? The magazines, they were duct taped together. So that's what they call the Afghan Afghan setup. So you stake out, then you flip, then you put it in. So it was known as that because it was very popular among Afghan guerrilla and militant fighters. And I think it wouldn't be too much of a stretch that ISIS-K could claim it, because ISIS-K is not actually a direct offshoot of ISIS proper. It was an offshoot of the Pakistani Taliban, who had to say that, the Afghan Taliban wasn't radical enough, so we need to show how it's done. And for the Taliban itself in Afghanistan to say that ISIS-K has gone too far, I think kind of it's a very weird world we live in when the Taliban has to condemn an attack like this because they're just more radical than the Taliban. So um, it's not just implications for Russia, but it also gives food for thought over what the Afghan government right now is trying to lay its priorities on in tackling, because ISIS-K is based in Afghanistan itself.
Yeah, so all of you, for those who are listening, like there's so many possibilities here. Like it could be countless possibilities that possible, and we here in Kopitiam Council are keeping a close step on what's happening and developing stories from Russia as well. Any last thought about this topic, Adi?
I think when it comes to looking at this issue, is we like to think that this whole age of terrorism may be kind of diminished or behind us, but it can happen anywhere, and we can see that Russia, which was known quite well in containing security issues, right, in its own borders, is experiencing all this. So anything could happen. So condolences, obviously, to the families and victims who affected by this catastrophe, and we hope to see that we hope that this doesn't escalate any more brutality and tensions in other theaters of conflict, such as Ukraine or in Syria or in Africa.
Yeah, and I believe that whatever happened in Russia, it's only happened because the Russian allows it to happen. So make no mistake, believing this is some sort of yes, condolences to those who lost perish in the attack. But also we need to understand that who benefit from all of this, so that we can have a bigger picture on world politics as well. So with that remark, I would like to end this topic on Russia in Crocus City Hall. And up next, what do we have, Adi?
I think we're going to continue this theme of intrigue a bit and go back to Malaysia, because we also have a bit of an episode of these all manner of behind the scenes web of shadows, cloak and dagger happening in the capital
Hitman.
city of Kuala Lumpur. So stay tuned for that. If you know, you know.
All right. Coming right